It also highlights the importance of ensuring that the ANC's most capable cadres must at all times be available to do organizational work and strengthen the ANC's hegemony in society. The paper proposes that the size of the National Executive Committee should be reduced and that the organization must limit the number of NEC members that serve in government, 65%, and ensuring that ANC leaders are spread throughout all sectors of society. And contained in this proposal is the recognition that some of the organization's best cadres must remain in the ANC on a full-time basis. It also poses questions pertaining to the size as well as the shape of the ANC branches, such as whether the current ward-based system is still adequate or whether there should be scope for sector-based branches or even a hybrid system of ward workplace sectoral branches. The paper puts forward that the organization must establish a revolutionary electoral commission to effectively deal with issues of gatekeeping, the manipulation of electoral processes. The paper proposes also that the organization reviews its nomination and electoral processes to allow for open contestation. Such open contestation must be informed by guidelines and transparency. The paper also proposes that the ANC should have a fully automated electronic recruitment and membership management system. And this system should be centrally commanded from the national office, and that lower structures should have visibility of the parts that pertain to them. This is part of a broader proposal pertaining to the modernization and enhanced use of IT in our organizational operations. The Economic Transformation Discussion document reiterates that the ANC's commitment to fundamentally changing the racialized and unequal structure of the South African economy. It acknowledges that our country has not made enough progress in reducing unemployment and that we need to increase wages and broad-based ownership and control of the South African economy. The ANC's program to transform our country's society and economy must therefore be judged on the extent to which it radically and systematically improves the lives and opportunities of those who are marginalized and excluded. It proposes a series of measures to ensure that we strengthen the radical economic transformation. These measures aim to reduce unemployment and specifically youth unemployment, to return land to our people, to increase black ownership and control in the economy, activate small businesses and cooperatives, raise levels of investment, strengthen social justice and conditions of the poor and the working class, improving employment impact of our infrastructure projects, reduce inequality and poverty, dismantle monopoly practices and structure, and assert our country's interest in the global economy, improving the integration into the African economy, and stimulate inclusive growth. The paper puts forward a range of specific proposals to drive radical economic transformation in specific sectors. We highlight a few of these: reducing unemployment and youth unemployment, a massive increase in youth access to vocational training and apprenticeship programs in combination with public service youth brigades. Infrastructure programs and municipal programs must include set-asides for labor-based work programs. Returning the land to our people and supporting land reform. We need to provide greater certainty for codifying the constitutional requirement of just and equitable compensation for the acquisition of land. Activating of small business and cooperatives. A targeted program to assist black entrepreneurs in setting up small businesses and cooperatives, strengthening social justice and conditions for the poor and working class, improvement in the quality of education, health services and public transport, better regulation of the private sector so as to avoid price fixing, unfair competition and unfair labor practices, as well as stamping out corruption. These are some of a few of the very detailed proposals that are contained in the economic discussion document. Communications and the battle of ideas remain central focus of the ANC. The communications discussion document focuses on how to maintain ANC hegemony in the context of a media environment characterized by greater media convergence, the combination of print, radio, television, online media ownership, production and consumption, as well as consolidation. Convergence amongst the dominant media houses continue to entrench editorial positions that seem resistant to the National Democratic Revolution, government programs, and the ANC as leader of society. The ANC must strengthen its communication capacity across all levels of the organization and in government in order to participate more effectively in the battle of ideas. The paper further acknowledges that the ANC must lead society in preparation for the impact of the Fourth Industrial Revolution that is characterized and driven by increased use of ICT in all human activities, and help different segments of society and the economy to adapt to this disruptive approach and epoch. For this to happen, the ANC must be prepared and organized to lead. It proposes the establishment of an ANC's Fourth Industrial Commission as a first step to creating the enabling environment and capacity within the organization. The paper emphasizes that effective participation in the Fourth Industrial Revolution means technological advances must be utilized to address poverty, inequality, and unemployment. It proposes, amongst others, that this area must be utilized to build and support ICT SMMEs and innovative startups. There is a lot of potential to train and employ young people in this sector. The social transformation document highlights that our social transformation objectives include prioritizing the rights of our children, creation of national identity, creation of an inclusive South African society. That will give effect to some of the goals that are contained in the Freedom Charter, and some of the proposals aimed at ensuring that the ANC succeeds in implementing its program of radical socio-economic transformation include: the provision of comprehensive social security remains fundamental position of the ANC, and this document makes a range of proposals on social assistance, on social wage, as well as social insurance. Promoting nation building and social cohesion, continuing to highlight the contribution of the arts, heritage, and culture by providing education, training, and skills through formal and informal programs in traditional and new creative methods and technologies is being advanced. We need to highlight the transformational potential of sport, resourcing sport adequately, and drive the introduction of sports ticket levy to promote transformation and the development through sports. With regard to human settlements, the paper begins a discussion on whether there should be a limit on who can access a government RDP house. It proposes that government housing should prioritize especially vulnerable groups such as the elderly and others such as a child and youth-headed households. The education and health discussion document covers 4 areas: 1, science, technology, and innovation; basic education; higher education; and health. The document highlights that most of its proposals aimed at on injecting more energies on implementing the ANC and government programs where government serves as the ANC's delivery tool or mechanism. The paper makes the following proposals, amongst others, on science, technology and innovation: that a focused process be set up to coordinate and harmonize policies and incentives, especially those related to science, technology and innovation. That a coordinating mechanism be considered and implemented to improve the use of science, technology and innovation within and across the public sector as an enabler of service delivery. On basic education, the existing resolution of the ANC on making education an essential service must be reviewed, as it has a potential to derail existing cooperation in the sector. On higher education, the technical and vocational training must be marketed as the first choice, leading to attractive career options for the majority of learners ahead of university education, and that a new financial support model to ensure that academically capable poor working class and middle strata students are supported to access higher education must be finalized and implemented by year 2020. On health, the health sector must continuously strengthen measures to improve quality of care that is being delivered by health practitioners in the public and private sectors, plus a draft policy to curb the high cost of medical insurance and litigation against medical malpractice. The international relations document reflects on the ANC's historic mandate of progressive internationalism that shape our country's current foreign policy outlook. In this regard, it confirms the centrality of Africa in ANC foreign policy and thereby commits to continue to pursue a peaceful and prosperous African continent. The paper confirms the ANC's belief in a holistic economic diplomacy strategy that is coordinated by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, as it is a very important component of our foreign policy. The paper makes recommendations to ensure that foreign policy remains guided by the National Development Plan's injunction to increase foreign direct investment and attract more tourists in order to build a resilient South African economy. The core theme of the Legislature and Governance discussion document is the articulation of the people's power through state institutions. It is a recognition and appreciation by the ANC that our people have entrusted the organization with political power to advance the needs of our people. Therefore, the ANC's conduct in state institutions must always reflect the will of the people of this country. The paper makes some proposals, such as that the ANC must enhance its electoral strategies that are aimed at recovering lost ground, and that such strategies must be informed by clearly developed policy on entering into coalitions. The presidency must be strengthened as the strategic center of power in the state and must drive the National Development Plan, planning and policy, resource allocation and enforcement. Fast-tracking the establishment of the Integrity and Ethics Management Office and building the requisite capacity at all levels of government. The scope of this office must extend to state-owned entities. There is a specific call for lifestyle audits of senior public servants within the context of fighting corruption. The deployment of cadres to the state must be based on merit, recruit public service managers with professional and technical capacity, and strengthen the school of governance and build the values and capacity amongst managers needed to lead a developmental state. There's also a proposal to hold a consultative conference around the issues of concern in traditional areas and develop a government policy to recognize the traditional leadership and customs. The Peace and Stability Discussion Document highlights that South Africa remains a relatively stable country and that economic challenges exemplified by unemployment, poverty and inequality represent a key threat to our country's stability. The paper highlights threats that are posed by terrorism, cyber terrorism and lack of skilled personnel to safeguard against cyber attacks, illegal migration, amongst others. It proposes a range of measures to address these threats, such as improving mechanisms to mobilize our communities in the fight against crime, improving intelligence and prosecutorial capacity, introducing lifestyle audits, broadening vetting and financial monitoring to curb corruption in the state. Ladies and gentlemen, the release of all these discussion documents heralds the start of a very intense program of discussions amongst ANC structures at all levels. Branches will be calling meetings and discuss their positions on all these proposals. The provinces will consolidate these branch proposals at provincial general councils. All these consolidated proposals will then be sent to ANC's headquarters by mid-June 2017. At the same time, the ANC invites engagement from all sectors of our society, and all the NEC subcommittees will embark on a series of consultations with all stakeholders and opinion makers. We have also created a web portal for members of the public to access and also to comment on these discussion documents that is available on www.anc.org.za. That's where you'll get the link. Finally, the ANC releases these documents to honor Comrade O.R. Tambo, who died in 1991, that the ANC, and said that the ANC must at all times remain a people's parliament, and that the people must at all times have a say in the shaping of the positions of the ANC. I thank you.
No, you don't give me. You're going to give me a standing ovation. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This work, the launch today, is a culmination of the hard work done by various subcommittees of the NEC, as led by different chairpersons who are present here today, leading discussion papers as launched by the ANC head of policy. As part of our work to engage with different stakeholders in the in-depth discussion about these discussions, the various stakeholders, various chairpersons will have similar engagement with stakeholders and sectors to engage about these discussion documents that are launched here today. So there will be an opportunity in the next 2 months to engage these various documents in depth. Present here are various chairpersons of NEC subcommittees who led some of the papers that were presented by the ANC head of policy. On my far right, communications discussion paper is led by the chair, Comrade Jackson Mthembu. To the left of Mthembu is the chair of IR International Relations, Comrade Edna Molewa. To her left is the chair of LG, Comrade Ayanda Dlodlo. To her left is a member of the drafting team, Comrade Umama, chair of the drafting team, Ulindi Zulu. I'm sure you know the face that is going to be familiar with you until the last day of the NPC, Comrade Jeffrey Tamsanga Khadeb. To his left is the chair of social transformation, Comrade Lindiwe Nongeba Sisulu. To her left, Comrade Nepsi, Sis Nepsi, your life. To her left is the chair of education and health, Comrade Naledi Mandisa Pandor. To her left, representing Ongekoyo, Comrade Nosivuwe Ngakula, the chair, is Comrade Mahlobo. I don't know, the chair of ETC. We will take questions, if any. Oh, yes. Just sitting behind me are two chairs of subcommittees who are also part of us. Just behind me to my left is the chair of organizing Comrade Fikile Mbalula, the first document which was presented. And the strategy and tactics, the chair of political education, Nyambose Comrade Nati. Mtetwa. We will now take questions. Pungane. Will be directed by Pungane in terms of, remember today's session, will be directed by Pungane in terms of who he thinks may answer which question. Tulas?
Thank you, Zuzi. Tulas Semerane from EMCA. Got many questions, but let me answer two. The one being on the balance of forces analysis. Just in summary, was it the conclusion of that analysis that there isn't indeed a threat that is posed by a regime change agenda that is driven by foreign forces, intelligence, etc.? And in that assessment, how much of the threat to the ANC's leadership of South African society is attributable to that regime change agenda, and how much is attributable to the ANC's own failures and weaknesses which we identify in this document? That's my one question. The other question is the question, I see that you talk about the presidency being a strategic center of power. What do you say then in the documents, because obviously we've not had the opportunity to really engage them, but what do you say in the documents about how important it is then to make sure that the person you deploy there is actually the right caliber of leadership, and please locate that within the context where you are saying that you want to ensure that people you deploy to government are people who, who it's based on merit more than anything else. So, yeah, just those two. Thank you.
Thanks, Tulas. Can you pass the mic to your...
Thank you very much.
No, that is the last round in that media house.
ENCA. Yo.
Yeah, in charge.
Zizi, on organizational renewal, it is stated there that the organization must act urgently to restore its moral character, more importantly, to win back the trust of the people. And you go further to say the importance here being emphasized by the ANC is to ensure that its most capable cadres must at all times be available to work with within the organization. How does that tally with what we're witnessing this morning, with Andile Lungisa being the chairperson or being elected chair of the region of Nelson Mandela Bay? Is he the most capable of your leaders to occupy that particular position? And how does that also work with him having been in the position of the provincial executive in Nelson Mandela Bay? There are clearly issues there in that regard. The other question relates to
You'll come back, Colin.
Legislature and governance. Sorry, legislature and governance. I see with interest there that you're saying the ANC must enhance its strategies, electoral strategies, aimed at recovering lost ground.
All right, we've just lost visual contact there at Luthuli House, but basically those were live visuals from Luthuli House where the ANC just launched their policy discussion documents. Now, the party's Jack Khatebe stated that
as proposed by the stalwarts and veterans of the ANC, because some people felt that the ANC constitution did not make provision for a consultative conference. So how is it possible to hold a consultative conference on one thing and not the other thing? Also on that same section, you talk about the strengthening of the presidency as a strategic center of power in the state. How does that relate to the ANC's traditional belief that the ANC is the center of power? So how, does that not reinforce the issue of two centers of power? And finally, the proposals to change the nominations and electoral process. If those are adopted at the policy conference, will they be enforceable for the 54th National Conference? Thank you.
Okay. Can you pass to Karima?
Hi, Karima Brown. I wanted to check in the policy pack on page 132. It speaks of the following core functions must be part of the strategic center located within the presidency. It talks about a dedicated and focused Department of State Policy and Planning that needs to be considered in order to locate all planning functions, expertise and resources in order to address inequities. Does this mean the creation of a new super minister and ministry in the presidency? And more importantly, what does it do to the National Planning Commission? Is this bringing the Planning Commission into the cabinet? Because the current situation is that it's a free-floating structure outside of governance. And then are you effectively talking about a two-tier cabinet? That's the first thing. The second thing is also on the future of provinces. It says here that you need to look at the future of provinces because it brings instability and that there is a task team that needs to report. So is the ANC mulling the future of provinces, and does that mean that you are looking at a different way of configuring the way in which South Africa looks? Are we going to do away with provinces completely? Are we going to have not that kind of governance system? That's the second question. And then on the third question, it's an addition to what Ranjani was saying. In the last NEC meeting that you held, you spoke about this rules of how you choose and get leaders, and there was talk about the branch being the most basic structure, and the nominations there go straight to this electoral commission that you've again spoken about, and only at conference it will happen. Does that mean the recommendations that came from NGC on regional conferences, provincial conferences, that you do away with that? And then also in that proposal of the NGC, it says that if one is contesting, say for president, and you lose, you have the right to contest for deputy. Is that going to conference? Is that part of what is the policy? Thanks.
Okay. From Karina to Karin.
Karin du Plessis, I'm freelancing for Huffington Post. I have a question. Obviously, it's the first time that we've seen these discussion documents, but I have a question about the organizational review.
You're right.
From what I've heard now being talked about, the ANC concedes that it's done less well in the elections last year and that this poses a threat for its status as a ruling or as a governing party. Has the ANC, or will the ANC discuss anything about how to be effective in opposition, seeing that you're in opposition in a few metros now, and that your opposition in Cape Town has not really, and in Western Cape, has not really brought you any good results in the sense of increasing your majority or your minority there, well, getting more votes there? Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Karin. Natasha?
Natasha from the Business Day. Also on the legislature and governance document, you talk about the presidency being strengthened and resource allocation being located there. Does that refer to the budgeting process? What exactly does that refer to in terms of resource allocation being located in the presidency? Thank you.
It's enough, you will last say.
One from TV Mozambique. My question goes to issue of communications. Well, although I've been around in South Africa for quite some time, I still don't understand the policy of ANC in terms of communication. But sometimes my background in Mozambique is when Frelimo, a central committee, says something, all the structures of Frelimo, I mean, Women League, Youth League, they follow that structure. But what I have noticed here in South Africa is that, for instance, Women's League, we have now the president of Women League, mostly campaigning for Dlamini Zuma, while the ANC Central Command says that no, they have not launched yet the succession campaign. We have, for instance, Youth League criticizing Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan, who I believe is a senior member of the ANC. So I don't understand, is that correct, or is it a matter of ill discipline within the ANC? Thanks.
Thanks very much for the questions.
Thank you for these many questions. On the first one, on the balance of forces, the Peace and Stability Discussion documents highlights the point that we are a relatively stable South Africa. So we have no major threats at the moment, like other countries and so on. But the main threat is the one of resolving the triangle of unemployment, poverty, and equality. So that remains our principal threat as South Africa. But it also highlights the point that, of course, it's not that everybody in the world loves South Africa, but you might find some people who may utilize those subjective difficulties that our country is facing in order to promote their own agendas that are not in line with our vision as South Africa. So that's the context that we need to put, that we should not blow over the top this issue of regime change things. Is not the principal threat. The principal threat is to resolve the socio-economic challenges that we face. So that is why it is important that for all of us as South Africans, we need to put our shoulder to the wheel to deal with the problems that are being confronted by our people and the country in order to create a better life for all the people of South Africa. On the issue of the points there, the legislature and governance, are also combine it, all that deals with the issue of the presidency. What is being said there is to increase the capacity, because the issue of planning is of critical importance. Already there is a semblance of planning in government through the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. The role of the National Planning Commission will not change. It continues to be an independent commission that advises the President and Cabinet and government at large of what the priorities should be, and also interacts with society at large how to implement the National Development Plan. So there is no intention of incorporating the National Planning Commission within the system of government. That debate was concluded in 2009. That is why it's only one person, myself, who is in the NPC. The rest of the commissioners are independent, expertise people who are providing service to our people. On the issue of resource allocation, let me explain this. Through the National Planning Commission, the National Planning Commission gave advice to government that if we talk about the National Development Plan, without the requisite budget that promotes the National Development Plan, the talk about the NDP will remain just a vain, glorious illusion. That is why that advice was taken to government, and government, through its cabinet Legislature in 2015, resolved that there has to be two processes in the budget reform in our country. The first one, the one that must be led by the Presidency and the DPME in order of prioritizing what are the main priorities of government. That's what is meant by resource allocation. So when that process is complete in reviewing all programs of government, if those programs of government are not fitting to the agenda of the NDP Vision 2020, we need to moderate them, even thinking of closing down those programs that are not giving us the outcome that we require in solving unemployment, poverty, and inequality. So that ends with a mandating paper that will be issued by the President. And then after National Treasury, we then do the actual allocation of budget. So there are teams between DPME and National Treasury that are driving this process. So I thought I needed to clarify that one. I will ask Comrade Ayanda to discuss the issue of provinces. But before that, I need to clarify this issue of a consultative conference. It should not be confused with the consultative conference that the ANC and the veterans, the group 101, is talking about. This is a different process that emanates from the legislature and governance, where it's being proposed that there has to be a consultative conference to deal with the issues that pertain to the institution of traditional leadership, to resolve many outstanding policy issues, and those outcomes will be able to assist the government to regularize the issues that the traditional leadership themselves have raised with government. So I thought I needed to clarify that one. What was the other question that... let me emphasize that. As I said, maybe we did not emphasize much. These are discussion documents. Only the National Conference of the ANC approves and adopts policy discussion documents. Even if all these policy proposals were to be approved in December, will not affect the current processes. They will be effective from the 20th of December after the conference going forward. So there should be no expectation that any policy proposals here tomorrow is going to be agreed to. It is not going to happen that way. On the issue, I would not want to go into the issue of Comrade Andile Lungisa, the SG, as we know from the media, wrote letters there, so let's leave the SG to deal with those matters. So I'll ask firstly Comrade Ayanda to deal with the issues of provinces and also coalitions as well, and then I'll also ask Comrade I think Jackson on communication. And Zizi, because Zizi has been talking about these matters on a long time. No, I think everybody has answered these questions that right now, that's why we're launching these documents. We are talking about policies, we are talking about principles, the issues of nominations. Our colleagues from Mozambique, it is wrong. So that's why the policy of the organization is that we are dealing about principles and programs and policy at the moment. After the National Policy Conference, the issues of nominations will then arise. Comrade Ayanda.
Thank you, Chairperson. On the future of provinces, this comes from the 53rd Conference of the ANC. So it's really an emphasis on what had been said or resolved on at that conference. So it's nothing new, Karima. It's still the same. On coalitions, we have experience in the ANC of dealing with coalitions, but that has never been documented. And part of the problem is that if you don't document some of these issues, it becomes difficult for you to share as best practice with other provinces or municipalities that come across situations of coalitions. But it also speaks to the planning processes and how it is that we need to deal with issues of coalition, what it is that we need to put on the table, what it is that is negotiable, what is non-negotiable. I think what we also need to be looking at as the ANC, and it happened in the last negotiations, is to say, what team, how should the team be constituted that actually deals with coalitions? We have put together a discussion paper on the development, developed a document on coalitions, which we will share with all the branches and all the regions. So it is still under discussion. We haven't finalized it, but it's a document that is well on its way to being finalized. Thank you.
I see my protest did not assist me. But by the way, the ANC allows any body and any structure to present a particular view, any view. The question is, when the movement says, on this issue, we will all start engaging from such a time, and it puts in place processes to engage on matters of selection of leadership. The NSC, the NWC says, all of us, we can then engage with those issues after the policy conference, after branches are starting to engage with, because that issue in the main resides with the branches of the ANC, the selection of leadership of the African National Congress. Now, the leadership has said, all of us, can we be quiet and allow the directive that we got from the leadership on the leadership question to be adhered to. And any one of us, if we go against that, then it's a sign of ill discipline on our part. Any one of us, immaterial who we are. That's why it's not a communication issue per se. It's an organizational issue where we are going against the grain and the directive of the organization on that particular matter. Indeed, the organization frowns on anybody or any structure of the African National Congress attacking any leader or anybody in the public domain. By the way, in the NSC, you can come and critique me the manner you want, or critique anybody the manner you like. But when you then take such criticism and even attacks to the public domain, we frown on that as the African National Congress. And again, it's a lapse in discipline. It's an area that will also be located in the arena of discipline. Thank you very much.
Shall we take the last round? I know they will be, because there's Matlatsi. No, wait. Which is? About, the threat.
The presidency is a strategic center of power in the state. How much importance are you placing on the quality of the deployment to the presidency? Because much is riding on that, of course, if it's so central.
We'll take that one.
No, let me answer. I think we've already answered it, even in the presentation that we made, and also in the documents on organizational renewal. It's very clear that we need to deploy cadres on merit, all those criteria that have been developed. So it doesn't matter whether it is in the presidency, cabinet, or at Luthuli House.
The issue of deployment must be based on merit. And as Jackson has said, at the end of the day, it is the branches of the ANC that must be able to nominate and actually elect leaders to the organization.
May I just advise members of the media that the next 2 months are going to be interesting. It will give you an opportunity to deal in depth with the discussion documents. I'm sure you just got a document, and I'm sure you will go back in your editorial rooms, prepare how you want to influence the direction of the ANC yourselves. And that's why we have about 2 months set aside, among others, to allow everybody across sectors in society, including members of the media, to engage with this. So today was really a launch, and I'm sure we'll just deal at a very high level with issues today. Matlatsi, please note that.
In terms of the electoral commission that is being proposed, who would actually make up that electoral commission? And I'm asking this in the context that 2 months ago, I think the SG Gweremantashe was talking about the fact that, even if you were to choose the ANC's veterans to be part of that electoral commission, it would be hard to say that they too would not have some political interest in whoever leads the party at the end. So does the papers give any thought in terms of who must make up that electoral commission? And then also it seems that there's a suggestion about a more transparent electoral policy somewhere where it talks about candidates and the branches interacting more. Does that mean that the ANC is finally considering some form of its candidates coming out openly and talking about what they would want to do for the party? And then as a last question, a lot of the documents, from what we've seen here, there isn't a major policy shift. And a lot of it, if you look at, for example, the policy documents of 2012, there are a lot of things that are contained there that the ANC says it must do. Things like, state bank, for example, which we are not there yet. I'm just wondering, in this policy document, are you honestly accepting some of the things that you have not been able to do as an organization, despite the numerous policy adoptions through in the past few years? And where should we go to find that?
Busi from SABC.
Yes, thank you. A very short one. I'd just like to find out, you say that in your social transformation discussion document, you talk about proposals that have been made around social assistance, social wage, and social insurance. I'm quite interested in light of, the saga around SASSA and what might happen at the 1st of April. What exactly are some of those proposals? If you could give us just some insight on that, please.
Simpiwe from SABC.
Good afternoon, it's Aldrin Sempier from the SABC. Just quickly on page 122, the document on education, there is a proposal there that says SARS should be the SARS process should be implemented to recover the loan portion of funding provided to working class and middle strata students by 2023. What form does this take? What is it that is expected of SARS? Is this something that when a student goes and applies for NSFAS, and they must know that this is the portion that you need to be paying back, and that will be deducted directly from your salary? The other question is with regards to title deeds. During the elections, it was in the ANC's manifesto or so forth to give out these title deeds or accelerate the process of issuing title deeds. Isn't it time for the ANC to document that once people get their RDP homes, that they should be receiving those title deeds as well? And back in 2012, I think there was a proposal by then Human Settlements Minister, Tokyo Sugwale, that South Africa cannot continuously issue RDP houses. Does this document speak about that as well?
Just pass to your right at the back. Simpiwe. Yeah, this is the last round.
Thank you. Mfuneko from Reuters News. I wanted to ask two questions. On land reform, is it fair to say that the ANC supports land reform, unequivocally supports land reform with compensation? And then there's a point where you say that a progressive tax measures should be reinforced. Does this mean a wider range of taxes, or are you proposing a focus on more wealth taxes? Thanks.
Nati, pass it right at the back. No, I'm not going to go back to... Now I'm going back to Bloomberg. ETC be ready. I think the question from Bloomberg. Sam Mkokeli.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. You're definitely right. It's about the ETC.
Yeah.
The statement read by Minister Jeff Khadebe talks on page 4 about the need to provide greater certainty on the constitutional requirement of a just and equitable compensation for the acquisition of land. What do you mean about that? Could you just give us more details, and how would you go about doing that? Does that mean changing the constitution? Thank you.
There was a hand right at the back.
Giovanni Majani from ANN7. I'd just like to find out, would the consultative conference be separate from the policy conference that is going to take place? And would just like to find out, in merit of presidency, does this mean that there are certain people who are going to be taken off the list in terms of popularity and what they can bring to the table? And the third question would just be in regards to allowing poor and middle class students to have access to education. Would this mean free education, or would this just mean widening the subsidy that is available currently?
Can you just repeat the question before the last? Popularity and so on? You are ready.
All right, yeah, they sent it from the office.
Just repeat it.
In terms of deployment on merit, even presidency, would this have an impact on the ANC's elective process? And would this criteria mean an elimination of some of the contestants?
Okay. I heard you. I'll clarify the two. Yes.
This is Tano Matutu from CNBC Africa. So my question is regarding the economic transformation discussion. I see here there's things that the proposals that they highlighted, referring to reducing unemployment, youth unemployment, and also returning the land to our people and supporting the land reform, activating small businesses and cooperatives. So all these things, I think they could be related to agriculture and agribusiness. So then, what platforms will the ANC open to the public to come with solutions in order to integrate all these things so that it can also support the social justice as well? Because the big issue is about markets and smallholder farmers as well. Is how can you integrate them with small business and also with the whole issue about land reform and how they can participate in the agribusiness sector? Thank you.
Okay. Can you pass it to your right?
Hi, everyone. My name is Melita Ngalungulu, and I'm from Forbes Africa. Okay, fine. In the past, we've seen measures, economic measures, transformation measures when it comes to BEE and affirmative action fall flat, right? And here on page 4, you speak about helping out small businesses, right, and activating them. How will you go about doing it differently this time around? Because we've seen business like Night One benefiting in the name of BEE. We've seen so many businesses in South Africa doing the exact same thing. So we want you guys to ensure us this time around that, okay, this will not happen again. We will go about doing A, B, and C. And also, when speaking about social transformation, right, with the whole SASA issue, how are you going to ensure that that will never, ever happen again? Because if you can't come here and bring us all the time to launch policies on social transformation, but we'll still continue to see our mothers and our grandfathers and elderly live in poverty and not being taken care of properly.
Okay, can you pass just in front to Skotani? I see now we're dealing more with current affairs, but I see we're dealing with current affairs, but we'll allow current affairs as we have started, so that in the next sessions, when you meet with different chairs, we'll not be dealing with current affairs. So I'm allowing it so that we are clear in the next 2 months. There are no current affairs, but we deal in details, because some of your questions you ask are answered in the document. You may find that you only read a page or two. Some of the documents are quite voluminous. I'm sure over the next 2 months, you'll be able to see some of the questions are answered. But it's fine. Go ahead, Skotani.
Saukelo Basego from Jacaranda FM. My question would be, what is the ANC's position or policy when it comes to, for instance, you've said that you want to change your election process, people may declare that they're available and what they will do. What happens then in a case where, like in KwaZulu-Natal, you've got a provincial conference that has been taken to court? What measures do you then take to rectify those situations that are currently unfolding in that province where a provincial conference is contested? And then on economic transformation, the president of the country and the ANC, President Jacob Zuma, has been speaking vocally on radical economic transformation. How are you going to ensure that there is radical economic transformation in the country, since there was a proposal by the EFF for you to vote with them on land expropriation without compensation? If I'm not mistaken, Ayanda Lodlo even wrote out a letter saying the day the ANC failed the people. What is your official position on land expropriation without compensation, since you want equitable share? How would you mitigate that situation with the EFF, where they are resolute on no compensation? And then the last question would be, within governance, how do you ensure that the CPS saga does not happen again, where a company is given a contract without no BEE status to any black company, and that efficient work is done? Thank you.
The mic just behind you, Skotani.
Thank you. My name is Nick Eli. I'm from Equality News. Page 5. There's a punchy sentence here that says, dominant media houses continue to entrench editorial positions that seem resistance to NDR, government programs, and the ANC as a leader of society. Now, I want to put it back to you and say, the same media houses are topping the list that is used by your government, ANC-led government, to advertise. How do you balance the two? Thank you.
Good. Now, just the sweeper behind you. The last question.
Thanks, Lizzie. Chair, unfortunately, I will have to insist that we are responded to on the issue of Andile Lungisa. The ANC is clear that it wants to strengthen its hegemony in society. Therefore, people who are morally acceptable should lead ANC structures. It doesn't make sense. There are many other examples I can draw, but I'll confine myself to him. How is the ANC to be taken seriously when it says it wants to restore its moral character in society? Thank you.
No, Ranjeni. Clarity on what, Ranjeni?
It's just a follow-up on what Jackson Ntembu just said. If people campaigning for certain candidates is ill-disciplined, when can we expect charges to be preferred against the ANC Women's League president? That's all.
Just to, before I allow Pungani, where is Nati? Please take that mic, because someone will... especially if it violates the ENCA. Just to explain to people who have asked questions about conferences that are still in session, conferences of the ANC that are still in session. What we normally do, people are deployed either to officiate from the province to national and so on. And there are some guidelines, including the overarching document called the Constitution, upon which we will receive a report as a NEC about whether that conference complied with the guidelines and so on. But when it's in session, it's difficult to make the comments you are asking. We will await for the report from the conferences that are in session, and on the basis of those reports, the NEC and the ANC, it is separate from the issues that the SU is dealing about. But I'm just saying organizationally, that's what we deal with issues. So we'll await the report from those who are deployed in Nelson Mandela, upon which we shall then respond to issues that have been asked. Pungane?
Thanks, Zizi. Let me reiterate that we are launching these policy discussion documents. They're still going to go to the branches, to the sectors, and consolidated to the National Policy Conferences only in December 2017 that any of these proposals, if agreed to by members of the ANC and their supporters, will be adopted. So there should be no expectation that what you read in these documents is going to be done right now. It might as well happen that branches reject some of the proposals. So you need to have that in mind. Secondly, that there are many current affairs issues that have been raised here. The purpose of this media briefing is to introduce to you these discussion documents. I have here with me a series of plans as to how the ANC is going to be engaging on this. For an example, today is the formal launch of these discussion documents. I do know that on Tuesday there will be roundtable discussions with some analysts, the SG, DSG, and myself. And then on the 19th, I know the Comrade Natim Teto will be addressing the media on the strategy and tactics document, organizational renewal, Mbalula. So there's a whole list here where you are going to be having a field day to asking detailed questions after we have read these whole documents. So I'll therefore ask the comrades that I'm going to ask to give an indication about the thought behind some of these proposals. For an example, I'll ask Comrade Mbalula to deal with this issue of the Revolutionary Electoral Commission, what lies behind it. I'll also ask Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu to deal with the proposal about the social insurance and social assistance. On the question of SASSA, there will be no answer to that question today. The President has made a statement assuring that on the 1st of April, these social grants will be paid to our people. There is a process that is unfolding at the Constitutional Court. As we know, the Chief Justice issued directions on Wednesday to SASSA to answer certain questions. And government, through SASSA, is going to be responding by 4 p.m. tomorrow morning. So there is a team that is meeting to assist both the Minister of Social Development and Finance. That meeting is happening this afternoon. So I'm just trying to indicate to you that the matter is on hand. On the issue of progressive tax return, or still with Lindiwe Sisulu will also deal with the issue of title deeds. Comrade Naledi will deal with the issue of SARS in terms of the monies that are owed by students. Comrade Enoch Godongwane will deal with the issue of progressive tax reform, as well as the just and equitable compensation. Comrade Jackson on the issue of communication, the issue of the editorial, as against the issue of adverts, as the comrade there has highlighted. On the issue of the consultative conference with the veterans, the NEC resolved on this matter after 2 meetings that were held with the veterans that the consultative conference that they were talking about will be part and parcel of the National Policy Conference. The first 2 days of the conference will be dedicated to all issues that have been raised. Last week, there was a special meeting between the National Working Committee and the Committee of Veterans, as well as people from former MK, where these matters were ventilated until an agreement was reached. That is why in the program of the National Policy Conference, you will see that it will be going to be catered for to discuss all the details that they've raised in their memorandum and subsequent to that. I also need to bring to your attention, too, that when you look at this issue of this consultative conference by veterans, read the organizational renewal document and see the issues that the ANC itself is putting forward. I'm sure we have noticed even some of the words I'm using. you are words that emanate from this document, because we are as concerned as everybody else about the state of the organization. So it is in our best interest that we resolve all these matters. So those comments on the issue of Andile, Comrade Zizi has responded to it. And then lastly, I'll also call Comrade Lindiwe Zulu, just briefly to indicate what different is the Ministry of Social Small Business Development is doing in order to support small business, because that's a question that has been asked, and also it arises from some of these policy discussion document proposals. Thank you. So we'll start Mbalula, Lindy, Naledi, Jackson, Lindiwe, Zulu, and Enoch. Uzayikopi also.
Thank you very much. In the document, we refer to Revolutionary Electoral College. Revolutionary Electoral College, meaning that we also refer to the dangers that we are faced with as a movement. And part of the dangers that we are faced with is to elect people that we don't know. As a result of the objective reality that the ANC is a growing political party and that there are new members who need to be socialized in the culture and traditions of the organization, factionalism, as part of the dangers that we are faced with, has got the potential to undermine everything else that is positive out of the growth of the movement. Gatekeeping, we talk about those things that we are faced with. And that the danger of electing people that we don't know arise because the dominant faction is the one that determines who becomes the leader. You refer to the question of quality of leadership in relation to the presidency and other positions. The Electoral College is one aspect that does not undermine democracy, but seeks to say, where do you come from? What is your tradition? Do you meet the criteria? Whereas the branches would have elected on the ground and made their pronouncement and their preferred candidates, but the Electoral College will then do an assessment and release those names back to branches for people to be considered for an election in the movement, so that they've gone through a proper examination without undermining the internal organizational democracy in the organization. So Electoral College is different from ISA, which will also continue to do its work. This is a political, non-partisan structure of people who've got no interest about who must be a leader except being guided by the principles of the movement through the eye of the needle and so on. So if you follow ANC renewal from Pulugwane to date, this is not a new proposal. We've simply dusted it from the cupboard and brought it back with new perfume and all of that, and given the new challenges that are ever present. Because when we considered in 2007, some of the challenges that we're facing now were not as rampant as they are. We're bringing it back because we think as a dynamic and modernizing organization, which is what renewal seeks to respond to. That, like somebody says, that in terms of what is the danger of the ANC being an opposition. The ANC renewal prepares the movement to be an organization that responds to all challenges and all material conditions, whether in opposition or not. That's why we are not on a back foot even where there is a coalition. We are forced into being an opposition. We're not on the back foot because our movement is ever ready to respond to such challenges whenever they arise. But I can tell you, we are preparing to remain in power forever. And that is not a statement of arrogance, it's our strategic objective. Not in the paper, though.
I'd like to start with the issue of the comprehensive social security strategy, and indicate, first of all, that those questions that have to do with the current issue of SASSA are matters of the administration of SASSA. What we are dealing with here is a general policy that determines how we deal with the most vulnerable people in our community. We have had time to discuss the various ways in which government responds to the most vulnerable, the poorest of the poor, and we've come to the conclusion that it would be very important for us to have a comprehensive social security strategy. This is what we have been dealing with to ensure that we are in one basket able to deal with free basic education for the poor, with quality free education for the poor, and passenger support subsidies for the poor, etc. And you'll find all of that ably integrated into the document that you have in front of you. There was a question about whether or not we learn from our mistakes and we amend our ways. Of course, the reason why we regularly go to policy conference is we put forward our policies and we look back at what has worked and we take on what has worked. We take into consideration also new circumstances that surround us on a regular basis, and we correct what we have done wrong quite regularly, and we use this occasion to do that. We'll look on you to indicate to us what you think we have done wrong and what we need to amend in the way that we are providing services to our people. And in line with that, we actually have in place a social assistance amendment bill, which has been put before us as a committee, and this will serve before Cabinet. And this is to ensure that we can refine the way in which we deal with social assistance. Amongst what we're going to be doing is ensuring that we can improve the administration of social grants, improve the efficiency of the appeals that come out of that, and improve the way in which we actually deal with social assistance appeals. So whatever comes out of the discussions that will be conducted by the IMC, headed by Minister, I almost said Professor Jeff, Minister Jeff Radebe, and whatever comes out of the discussions in the Constitutional Court tomorrow, etc., obviously, if we find that we need to do something about the administration, it will fall very squarely into that bill that we will be dealing with. On the issue of whether or not we should not do something about the abuse of people, the elderly, and etc., one of the things that we are doing in social transformation is actually focusing on how we transform our society. We have for a very long time been dealing with the issue of delivering to ensure that the poorest of the poor are taken out of their poverty. Right now, we want to make sure that as we talk about radical economic transformation, we talk about radical social transformation. That has to do with our culture as well. That has to do with the way that we look after the elderly, that has to do with the way that we look after children, and etc. And our colleague from Mozambique, that also has to do with our own culture, how we can improve our culture. The question you are asking about has to do with the culture that we have in the ANC, which might be very different from the culture of Mozambique. You're a very lucky country in the sense that your revolutionary culture continued with you because the complexities of your country are not as much as the complexities that we found when we took over after apartheid. We envy you for retaining that culture, and we would like to ensure that we do have a culture that we're proud of, that reflects our values, that reflects what we had in the Freedom Charter. Finally, we would want, it has to do with title deeds. Title deeds are a serious problem for us because of a number of reasons. And ENCA, I don't know if ENCA is here, had the opportunity to give us a snapshot of what some of the problems are in dealing with the older stock of title deeds. Our intention is indeed to ensure that as we give out a house, we give out a title deed. All the administrative work that goes with it is now being put into place, and it has taken us longer than it should have, but it is because it is a really very complex problem. It goes beyond the responsibility of government and gets into the terrain of society. There was once a time when I made a terrible mistake and decided that all our houses will be given to women because I thought that women are the primary caregivers. And the men in the country thought perhaps I should be beheaded. Sorry, rewind. But we need to find a strategy in which we can actually ensure that even as we give title deeds, we give the title deeds to people who deserve them and will look after those houses. We have a serious problem now with the xenophobic issues where our people are complaining that houses are being sold and are being used for other purposes. It's something that we have to be dealing with and make sure that the title deed concept does cover that. Finally, on the matter of the B&G houses, we stopped producing RDP houses in 2004. RDP houses belong to that phase when we had the reconstruction and development policy. In 2004, we moved away to what we call integrated human settlements so that we can deal with the spatial planning of apartheid and create more integrated societies. These houses, which are improved houses, were conceptualized in 2004. That's what we're building. They're called B&G houses. And whether or not we will continue to give out those houses will be determined by the outcome of these discussions. But we would want to lay a very firm groundwork on who qualifies and who doesn't qualify. We want, as Comrade Jeff has indicated, to ensure that we target the most vulnerable in our society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Jeff. I want to begin by making a moot point about the Constitution. Constitutional matters are not addressed through amending one clause in the Constitution, because all the clauses fit into each other in a very neat way. It's a very well-structured Constitution. And so the assumption that you can just change Section 28 and everything else falls into place, 25, is mistaken. So I think we need to move away from the manner in which we're debating this important matter of land access and transformation of distribution of ownership of land. It's a much more refined issue than the manner in which we're debating it. And I thought I should just make that point. And if you look at the full context and read all subsets of Clause 25, you'll actually find that it's quite an enabling clause in the Constitution. But let me leave it there. Now, we're very, very pleased that in terms of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, we've been able to make significant inroads in terms of both supporting access and success of young people in higher education. But as we deliberate on the matters of higher education, one of the issues that became clear is that we're not reaching all those who've been beneficiaries of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. And even some who have found employment have not been reached through SARS to begin repaying the loan component. So what is referred to in the document is we need improved systems. Interestingly, Rhodes University has just conducted a dipstick study of graduates who were NSFAS recipients and has found a number have said, I'm keen to pay back, but I don't know how. No one has contacted me. So we need to improve both the form and content of reaching those who've been beneficiaries of the scheme to ensure when they reach the threshold for repayment of the loans that we're able to recover those funds and reinvest them in NSFAS so that more young people could be supported. But the beauty is that each one of us, I'm sure, seated in this room, can find one person who was a beneficiary of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme and who is grateful that the government of the ANC actually strengthened the scheme and ensured it supported many hundreds of thousands of young people. So essentially, it's seeking to improve, because our process of generating the discussion documents is a ground-up process. It comes out of a range of meetings, comes out of the work of our branches, comes out of what we're hearing and receiving from the various stakeholders. So it's not what comes out of our head. It's a reiterative process, but we have to take it to our constitutional processes in order to then agree on what becomes policy and what is not seen as needing to be adopted. So thank you very much.
Jackson.
The question is, we are still spending our ad spend on those that are resistant to what we stand for, and those that seem to go against the grain of the NTR in the media space. Indeed, there is that view. When you read the document in the Battle of Ideas, there is a view that says some in the media terrain are still not agreeing with the political posture that we must have an inclusive political order, an inclusive social order, an inclusive economic order. There are some people who might want to continue with the previous status quo, unabated, even in the media, including in the ownership patterns of the media itself. And we are saying, no, there must be change. Ownership patterns of the media must represent the peoples of South Africa as a whole. It can't only be limited to a few people who are white-skinned and male. That's the point that we're making. And therefore, the document is very correct. But we are saying government is duty-bound to reach out to all people in South Africa. And in some instances, government can only reach out through those people who are not even adding value to the programs of government. But we're saying government, there are other communicating platforms that can reach out to more numbers in South Africa. We are talking to community radio stations. We are talking to community television stations. We are saying that we must do more as government to direct our ad spend to these community stations, radio or television, and including print media. But having said that, wherever government directs its ad spend, it must derive maximum returns. And we argue in the document, and of course, as Comrade Jeff has said, we will have time with you. In fact, we want to speak to you on this matter of engaging with the media, also on the posture of the ANC in relation to the political order that we like ensuing in the country, social order, economic order, so that we also convince you to align yourself to our thinking. And that's what is contained in the Battle of Ideas. We'll continue engaging with you. But in many instances, there are some who have decided to close their mind to this social narrative that we stand for. So the matter is well addressed, but we must direct more of government ad spend to other community media and community television. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think Comrade My brain clogged, yeah. Comrade Enoch Godongwane will further explain what is on the document in relation to economic transformation. The question that's related specifically to small and medium enterprises and cooperatives, you will see that on page 77, we refer back to the decisions of the Mangaung conference that deals specifically with what needs to be done to advance radical economic transformation. And for us in the Economic Transformation Committee, we're looking at what is the meaning of radical economic transformation and how do we intend how do we intend ensuring that that does happen. And if you go through all the topics that are there, if you go to, for instance, on page 82, where there is reference to defending the ANC's vision of a developmental state, and then you ask yourself the question in relation to distribution of land, in relation to supporting small and medium enterprises, we need to go back to the fact that South Africa is a developmental state. And if it is a developmental state, therefore, in supporting your small and medium enterprises and the institutions that you use to do that, you take, for instance, your Small Enterprise Development Agency, your Small Finance Agency, and all other FDIs that are there. Do they act in a manner that reflects the support for SMMEs from a developmental state point of view? If you go to page 83, you'll also see that we're talking about reviewing the macroeconomic policy stance. And the reason why we have to look at that is if we talk about radical economic transformation, are these policies in line with ensuring that you create that conducive environment for small and medium enterprises? If you go to page 84, you'll see that there's a vision of inclusive growth and employment creation. How do small and medium enterprises participate in ensuring that that inclusive growth does happen? And that's why the government speaks to the issues of ensuring that there is support for small and medium enterprises both in all sectors of the economy, whether it's in agriculture, because the issue here was spoken about agriculture and agro-processing and the land issues. If you go to and looking at the economy, if you go to 88, for instance, it talks about economic infrastructure. How do we improve the infrastructure to ensure that even your township economies and even the people who are in the informal business, the environment is created for them to make sure that they participate? Most of the time, if you go out here into the city, for instance, you'd find that those who are in the informal business, who are selling out there, many a times are harassed because the laws and the regulations do not enable them to do that. So when you speak about creating that environment, it talks to how do you improve that for small and medium enterprises. As for, and then it talks about the inclusive rural economy transforming the lives of rural poor. Again, you spoke to the issues of land and the allocation of land. You've got smallholder farmers and smallholder farmers versus the bigger farmers. What policy decisions do you make to make sure that you support those smallholder farmers? And for us in the Department of Small Business Development, if I may, because these are policy proposals that have to then be implemented by government. So as a Department of Small Business Development, we're looking at all the sectors that are being presented here as potential for supporting small and medium enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Chair. If you see Comrade Zizi coming closer, it is because both Comrade Zizi and Comrade SG are uncomfortable when I'm going to address the press. I always say, I didn't mess up this time. They said, okay, no. I think, the issue really, you'll see the text proposals referred to there are also attached to the land question. Those text proposal, Now, we did what Jola did. Dusted off the ready to govern, put some perfume as he did. That's what we did as well. If you look at the ready to govern, there are a whole series of measures that says we should do about the land question. Among other things, is to take over speculative land, unoccupied land, distressed or highly indebted farmers, and so on and so on. That's what the ready to govern document says. It then says, what are the instruments to achieve that objective? What are the instruments to achieve that objective? The first instrument is the legislative framework. Unfortunately, I must concede to Matasi that some of these areas we have not been able to achieve on time. 20 years since the signing of the Constitution, we then have an Expropriation Act which is in line with the Constitution. And I think that's the point Matasi was raising. The second instrument, a tax proposal, in that document. Mind you, if you have got to force somebody who's sitting on a land, speculating on that land to sell the land, you've got to use tax measures to force them to sell. That's what the progressive tax movement. That's in the ready to govern document. So you've got to take measures so that people should not be speculating with land, and unutilized land also must be made available to the state, but within a legislative framework which is supportive. The third instrument is that for those that have been assisted with redistribution and restitution, we must provide, implement, and support measures. That's broadly the framework which has been proposed in our situation. So throughout these documents, in the ready to govern document and the RDP, reference is made to the Bill of Rights because there was no Section 25 at the time. A reference is made to the Bill of Rights, both in the ready to govern and in the RDP. The RDP is exactly a replica of the ready to govern document on this question. Then we came in 2012 and made an explicit statement and assertion, and I want to quote that. I wish to quote that. It says, an expropriation without compensation on land acquired through unlawful means or used for illegal purposes, with due regard to Section 25 of the Constitution. Now, can you see a consistent in the sense that in the ready to govern and in the RDP we make reference to the Bill of Rights because there was no Section 25. Now there's clarity to Section 25. We make reference with due regard to Section 25 because they wrote an existing act. So, in a sense, we unashamedly make proposal to tax land that is used for speculative purposes to force people to sell. But there are different other legislative mechanisms so that when they sell, they must sell to us. I can't elaborate on that today. All right? It's other measures we're thinking about how do we make sure that they sell to us. Somebody talk about how to make sure there's going to be public participation. Comrade Jeff has given us a deadline. He's a strict person when it comes to this. What he says to us, chairs of committees, before the policy conference, give me an outline on how you are going to consult stakeholders. We're more consulted in every conference, and we go out to a conference. I don't know whether I've met your deadline. But I'm trying to say we're consulted in this regard. On the small and medium enterprise, Comrade Lindy has elaborated on that. One minor addition. The South African society has got to confront this issue of access to finance head on. Across the board, whether it's for small and medium enterprise, the issue of access to finance is critical. Both for small and medium enterprise, I want to prove that, and for black economic empowerment in general. If we want to make this radical transformation and transfer assets to black people, There must be funding available for these changes that are. Unfortunately, the black people have been deprived of assets, so they've got nothing to utilize to transform. So somebody has got to step up to the plate. Who that is, I don't know. It's a matter for discussion. So that's I just wanted to add that issue of access to finance. Small and medium enterprises, if they don't have access to finance, what remains? That's one of the key questions we're going to grapple with. And that's my end note. Please don't call me. Meet you on the 9th of April. Thank you.
I think as we conclude, I just want to leave you with 4 areas. The first one, in all the discussion documents, you will see the words radical socio-economic transformation. I think it's important to understand that this is not a creation of 2017, but this entered our lexicon more graphically in 2012 at our Mangaung conference. But even then, does not complete the picture, because way back in 1955, that's where the real radical socio-economic transformation started, with the adoption of the Freedom Charter. So that Freedom Charter remains our basic policy document as the ANC. So secondly, we are going to be reading about the National Development Plan, because that National Development Plan is that program of implementing this radical socio-economic transformation of South African society. Thirdly, we are talking about using state lever as an instrument of effecting the change that we require in South Africa. That's why it's so important, the points that have been raised, even in the organizational renewal document, that we require those cadres who will be able to interpret this NDP, the radical socio-economic transformation, so that we can be able to drive change. Lastly, the branches of the ANC, with this paradigm shift from the issues of political democracy, which has entrenched itself in South Africa, is now that we need to talk about economics. That's how we need to talk about the economy, so that we can change the lives of our people. So that's basically why these discussion documents are so important, not only for ANC members, but also supporters as well as South Africa at large, so that we can build the South Africa of our dreams of 2030, where poverty would have been reduced, inequality as well as unemployment would have gone down. Thank you.
Letting 100 flowers blossom and 100 schools of thought to contend, the Festival of Ideas has just begun. Until we meet again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
All right, well, those were live visuals coming in from Luthuli House, where the ANC just launched their policy discussions document. Jeff Radebe spoke extensively about the proposed changes to their current policies, ranging from a range of issues like that the ANC must limit the number of cabinet members to ensure that more disbursement of grant soldiers in order to effectively deliver their programs, that they establish a revolutionary body, review its electoral processes like